Well, hi everyone, and welcome back to my garden. So I've got a lovely project today, and the topic of today's video is leaf mould, because it's the perfect time now, autumn, fall, to start collecting in all your leaves in your garden and making your leaf mould. So I'm going to very quickly explain, for those of you who don't know, exactly what leaf mould is, why we gardeners love it so much, and I'll show you a very quick method of making your leaf mould, how I make my leaf mould, and it really speeds the process up. So first things first, what is leaf mould? And it's quite simply 100% decomposed leaves. That's all. It's completely natural. It's 100% organic. You don't have to add anything to it. So that is what leaf mould is. So I brought some sacks from behind the greenhouse just to show you what the leaf mould looks like. So that's just an old compost bag. I've kept it in, and these are old coal sacks. Anything will do. So the leaves in this bag here, in these bags, I collected that last autumn, last autumn. And I'll show you what you do with them when you put them in the bags. But that is what they look like now. So those leaves are a year old. It's moist, but it's not wet. It's lovely and crumbly. So that smells gorgeous. There's nothing unpleasant at all about the smell of these decomposed leaves. It just smells like a forest. It's lovely. So now I'm going to show you the two ways that I collect leaves, and the one that I think is best. Right, so the first way you can rake your leaves is just with a manual garden rake. You rake your leaves in and then gather them all up completely whole, and store them. I'll show you where I store them in a moment. But the problem I've found with that is the leaf mould I've just shown you is a year old and it's ready to go onto the borders. When I used to just rake the leaves and then store them whole, they weren't quite ready in a year. They used to take about 18 months to break down to that consistency. So what I found was, and my mum bought me this, and this is a leaf sucker. So it's got a big sort of hoover bag on the bottom. And if you've got a lot of leaves in your garden, you need a leaf sucker with a big bag, otherwise you'll be emptying it constantly. So I love it because my mum bought it for me. But it's quite heavy. And this one, you actually plug it in. You can get them with a battery attached and they're even heavier. So it's got some little wheels on the bottom, and you're just supposed to sort of run it along the ground like that, sucking up your leaves. So I'll show you. I'll do the leaves on the drive first. So all these leaves here, I know for a fact I can suck these all up, and tomorrow they'll all be back again, just as many. But one very important thing that I like to do is I like to just give it a quick go over with the manual rake like that, because especially if I was using that leaf sucker in the garden, I'm always terrified that there's some little field mouse or something hibernating in the leaves. I can't bear to think of it. So yeah, just do that, and then anything that's in would scurry out. So I'll have to go quiet now because it's very noisy, and when I put the leaf blower on, you'll not be able to hear me talk. You see, I called it a leaf blower there, but I've never blown leaves around. I can't see the point. You might clear your drive and then they'd be back 10 minutes later. Right, so why isn't this turning on? Right, so it's got two settings, a blow and a suck. So I'll do that. Oh, crumbs. So there. So that's the problem that you have. Even when the leaves are dry, and you've got a lot of them, they sort of get matted at the nozzle end. I mean, it's very satisfying doing it, I must say, but you can imagine doing this for an hour. It's quite hard work. Right, so I can tell by the tone, the change in tone to the motor, that something's got stuck up here. So what I would have to do is take the bag off, unplug it, take the bag off, and then get that blockage out. So it's got for's and against, but that bag's pretty full anyway now. And I've only done that little part. So I'll show you the way I collect my leaves in now. It's much quicker, much easier. Right, so what I do now is I use my lawnmower. You get the same shredded result as you do with the leaf sucker, but it's so much simpler. So I'll get my rake. So when I'm finished, I'll show you the shredded leaves in the bag from the leaf sucker compared to the shredded leaves in the container on the lawnmower. So what I do is I just gently pull all of the leaves off the pack, pull them onto the lawn like that. Most of the leaves, like I say, I leave in the borders, but so there, you've got a nice big pile on the lawn. And then you just mow over the top. I'm slightly lifting the mower. I'm not sort of keeping it down on the bottom. So do you see how much easier and how much quicker that is? So I'll get the leaves out that I've shredded. See, that's full already. And then I'll go and get the leaves out the bag. So these are the shredded leaves out of the mower. I mean, there's one or two that are still whole, but you can see it's a much finer mix, isn't it? And these are the leaves that have been shredded in that leaf sucker. It's pretty much the same. And then if we compare it to if I just collected the leaves up in the garden, right, so you can see already 3 handfuls of unshredded leaves make that size pile, whereas that is from the drive and that is from this space here on the lawn. So you get a much bigger volume of shredded leaves than you do unshredded. And that's important when it comes to where you're going to store them. So the next question you might have is, well, where do I store all these leaves that I'm collecting in order to make the leaf mould? Because they have to be stored for quite a long while. As I've said, it can take up to a year to make a bag of leaf mould. So I'll show you one area where I used to store my leaves. So this is the area of my garden behind the greenhouse. It's where my compost bins are. And this is a new cold frame this year. But before that, in this exact area here, I made a sort of little fenced area. It wasn't a proper fence. I didn't build a fence. I just bought one of those concertina trellises that you grow clematis up. So we are in our garage now. So this is the kind of thing that I used. And then I just sort of wedged it into that space. Not as open as that, just about like that. It wasn't very tall. Or you could make a little fence out of sort of this chicken wire stuff. Anything that'll just stop the leaves from blowing away. But you can imagine, can't you, when you look at all the leaves that are going to come down from these trees, and also from the surrounding area. So I've got another big tree there. I've got a rowan tree there. Our neighbours have trees. There are trees outside the boundary wall of my house. Loads of leaves. So yes, you can imagine when I wasn't shredding the leaves, that area there just filled up really quickly. But if you haven't got too many leaves, then that would work perfectly fine. And the beauty of that is that the leaves are open to the elements. So that's really important because they need to be kept damp. So now that I no longer have that little fenced in area, I store all my shredded leaves in old compost sacks or any sort of heavy duty sack that you may have. And what you do is you just fill the sack. You can fill it right up to the top. This smells gorgeous as well. It's great fun doing this. I should have my little grandson here. He would love this. And it's amazing how long it takes before you get rid of all the leaves. I can be shredding leaves for months. Long after my trees have finished shedding their leaves. I don't know where they come from sometimes. Right, so I've got the leaves in the bag. The next thing to do is add water because they've got to be moist. So you give them a good watering. And the reason that you have to have your leaves moist before you scrunch your bag up like that and leave it for a year is that fungus has to grow. That's how the leaves decompose. And that's different from when you make compost out of your kitchen scraps and things, because that is bacterial decomposition. I think I've got that right. Anyway, it doesn't matter. This is how you make leaf mould. And then what you do is you jab the bottom of the bag with some air holes and to let the moisture out. And then, you know, that's only half full. You could have that bag full. And then you put this somewhere out of sight, out of mind for a year. You never need revisit it. You don't have to keep opening it up and turning it or anything, you know, like you do with when you're making compost. You just leave it, and in a year's time that will look like that, and you can spread it on your garden. So you it doesn't need to be in the light. You could put that in You know, you could build a stack up in the corner of your hut or the corner of your garage. You could hide it behind your greenhouse, as I do. What you don't want is, I don't want all of this on show in my garden, so I just sort of squirrel it away in different places. And then, like I've done now, go and get it out this time of year and I can spread it on the garden. So it's as easy as that. But you might be thinking, well, why go to all that bother? Why is leaf mould good for your garden? So why do we gardeners love leaf mould so much? And there's so many reasons, but the first thing that springs to mind in my garden is I love the fact that the leaves have come from the trees in my garden and the immediate vicinity. I've collected them up. They stay in my garden, and once they've reached the right consistency in a year's time, they go back into my soil. So it's completely sustainable. It hasn't cost me a penny. I haven't had to get in the car and drive anywhere to a Home Depot and buy a bag of soil improver. Nobody's had to make it in a factory and drive it to the Home Depot so that then I can buy it. It's just 100% sustainable. And leaf mould is so good for your garden. So you might be thinking, well, why is it good for my garden? How does it work? So what I would say is, for any gardeners who are really missing the peat content in their shop bought growing medium or their shop bought compost, I would say that leaf mould will give you the nearest organic replacement to that peat, and that's because it works in exactly the same way. So when we used to have peat in our compost, the peat used to change the structure of that compost so it was nicer to work with, but the main thing was that the peat would retain the moisture, and that's what's missing now. And what I've found is that if I put a few scoopfuls of leaf mould in with my shop bought compost and then mix it all together and put it in my pot and plant my plant, then when I come to water it, that water doesn't just leach straight out. The leaf mould holds on to the moisture the same way that the peat used to do. So you're not watering constantly, and it's much better for the plant because it isn't sort of swanging from soaking wet to dry within a matter of hours. So the plants aren't as stressed. So I have an old metal dustbin just at the back by the compost bin there, and that's where I keep my leaf mould with a scoop, and that's what I use when I'm sort of potting up tubs and things. But I also use it that way when I'm planting a new plant in the garden. So I'll dig my hole, and then I put some of the soil back into the bottom of the hole, and I add some leaf mould and I mix it up like cake mix, and then I put the plant in, and then I put the garden soil back in. So it's much easier for that newly planted plant or young plant to get its roots out into that new crumbly soil. The second way of using it is that you just spread it on top of your soil around your plants, and you just leave it like that. And you can do that in the autumn, or you can do any time of year really, but most people do it in the autumn. If they've had a clear up and they've got soil exposed, then they'll put their leaf mould on top of the soil. Or if you clear up in the spring, as I tend to do now, then you just do it then. And what happens is you spread it on your soil and leave it and let the worms pull that down into the soil, and they will do that over the course of a few months. And what happens then is that it's very naturally changing the structure of your soil. So if you've got really heavy clayey soil and you cover it in leaf mould, then you'll find the next year, after having spread the leaf mould, that actually the soil's much easier to work with. It's looser. Leaf mould not only retains the moisture in the soil, but it also aerates the soil as well. So it just does produce a much better structure for little roots to get out into, so your plants benefit from it. And not only will it change the structure of your soil for the better, but when it's lying on top of the soil, it acts as a weed suppressant, and it stops any moisture from your soil just evaporating really instantly on a hot day, because it's got this layer of organic mulch on the top. So yes, I use mine both ways. So that's it. It's as easy as that. I do hope you give it a go, because you're collecting your leaves up anyway and getting rid of them. So you may as well make your own leaf mould. So thank you so much for watching. I do hope that you found this video useful. And I'd love it if you came back and visited my garden again, and I'll see you next time. Bye.